girls and our women are the fastest growing prison population per capita in the world.
It's 100% of the juvenile justice centres in NT, 100% is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, 100%.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Johnson from Impact Policy. Welcome to our next edition of the Impact Policy podcast. It's a privilege today to be joined by one of my oldest friends, Adam Hansen, godfather to my firstborn. We go way back. Have been through a lot together in many different ways. Some good, some bad. Some not ready for camera. But he's also gone on to do some amazing stuff professionally. Most recently, TAFE New South Wales Student of the Year for some amazing education stuff he's done, but he's also doing that professionally as well. I won't talk too much. I'll give him that space to share that because that's what he's here for. But let's get into it. So, Adam, do you want to just maybe start by just giving us a little bit of background to yourself?
Yeah, brother. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on. This is unreal. Kind words. I appreciate it. It's an honour to be here. For myself, I'm a Noongar man, so I'm a long way from country. Just like to acknowledge what's gone on before us and pay respects to elders past, present, and it's just awesome to be here with yourself to listen, learn, and share our experiences. And I think that's what it's all about. And I have a lot to share. So for me, as I said, I'm a Noongar man. So my people come from southwest of WA. Small coastal town called Bunbury. Yeah. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours southwest of Perth. I was actually born in Perth, lived in Bunbury for the first couple of years of my life, and unfortunately for me, I didn't get to grow up on country or with close family. My mum met my stepfather when I was 2.5, 3, and moved away from Western Australia and settled in a place called Griffith in Riverina, New South Wales. Lived there for 10 plus years and found myself in Sydney. There's been a lot of in between, but I normally say Perth, Griffith, Sydney. Yeah. Just to keep it really simple for people because it can get confusing.
Yeah, totally. And that's where we connect up, right? We're both Glebe boys. We've known each other since we were probably about 12 years old. And I think we're having a laugh before this about how this is probably the first podcast where you'll find two blackfellas that have lived in homeless, accommodation, talking about all things social policy and all that sort of space as well. So
yeah, I guess we got to pinch ourselves a bit there. It is. I think you weren't the first OG person I met in Glebe, but you're the second. David being the first. I met Dave first, and then he said, "Oh, you might get on with this bloke down the road," and we rode our bikes to your place. And I remember meeting you and Joel there. I think I was 14 or 15 or 14, I think. So a long time ago. We had a lot more hair back then too.
Yeah, probably getting started. Did we ride them bikes or steal them bikes?
I think Dave doubled me actually.
That's it. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, right? Like, we've both had our own sort of, complex issues in our families that we've had to navigate that have seen us, have to overcome a whole range of different things. And, do you want to just give us a brief, don't want to go deep into your stuff because I know you've had a lot of stuff that you've been through in your life, but just for people that might be watching, just to get a bit of an idea of what those teenage years were like and how maybe we come together as well when we were living together.
Yeah, I guess I start all the way back with my beautiful mother. She struggled. We grew up in Housing Commission. Mum split up with my stepfather when I was about probably 7 or 8, and pretty much a single mother. I'm the eldest of 7. My family is so complicated. A sister. We have both same mum and dad. Yeah. And then I've got a brother and sister. We've got the same mum, and then to my stepdad, he's got three boys. But we all grew up at stages together. So I always say the eldest of 7. I've never ever said half brother or half sister or step. It's just brother or sister. That's it, yeah. And you know what my brothers and sisters look like, and we don't look alike at all. Yeah. My brother, I guess he looks similar to me, but he's fair. Yeah. And my sister has red hair. And I remember growing up. I reflected on this a few years ago. I remember walking home from school, and I remember a couple pulling my sister over, who's fair skin, red hair, and they pulled her over and asked if she was okay. Yeah. I think I was in year 5 and she would have been in kindy. Yeah. And they asked her if she was okay. And then she said, yeah, I'm walking home with my brother, blah, blah, blah. And they drove off.
Yeah,
I didn't really know what that meant at the time. And I still didn't for quite
Yeah.
a number of years. And then as I reflected on that, I came to the realization that they were probably checking up on her
Yeah.
to see if she was
100%.
okay, walking
Yeah,
home
yeah.
with a dark kid. I'm quite
Yeah.
literally the black sheep of my family.
Yeah,
And
profile on you.
yeah,
100%.
for sure. And I've had that growing up.
Yeah.
Experienced numerous cases of racism, especially in primary school. That kind of stopped in year 4 because I learned how to throw them. And it didn't stop them from doing it behind my back, but it definitely stopped it from happening to my face.
Yeah.
I remember I got suspended in year 4.
Yeah.
Group of kids called me some not nice names, very racist names.
Yeah.
And I lashed out with a garbage bin. Got a 21-day suspension.
Yeah.
Similar thing happened in year 6. I didn't get suspended at that time. I actually got expelled. Same thing, same group of kids. Small country town. It's kind of who you hang around is quite limited because it's a small town.
Racism a bit amplified too, maybe, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think in the smaller countries,
Glebe was quite diverse.
Yeah,
and
that's
a lot of mob there too.
Yeah, and that's one of the main differences I realised coming from Griffith, which is a big country town, to Glebe, to Sydney. And I remember in Griffith, it was pretty much at school. It was like, it's a big Italian area, so I went to school with a lot of Italians. But it was like Italian, white, or black, and that was it. And even though Griffith's quite diverse as well, but it was just kind of Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, and Italian, and that dynamic played out at school. And I remember in year 6 I got expelled, and they changed that to a suspension. Mum fought really hard because I went home. Mum was upset at first, but then I told her what happened. They were and I copped racism from kindy all the way through year 6, and it kind of exploded. And it was right towards the end of year 6 as well. And I lashed out with a cricket bat. I hit a few guys. I'm not bragging about this, and not something I'm not proud of. Yeah. I've definitely learnt how to regulate those emotions and those feelings a lot better. And I think you do that with maturity and experience.
I wrote about the same thing recently when I put a blog out around the Spark Impact stuff that we do. I talked about getting suspended 4 times in the first 4 weeks of year 7 at Balmain High.
Yeah.
100%. Like, we're not bragging, but you need to have insight, right? And
for sure.
Be able to reflect.
And one of the main differences, so moving from Griffith to Sydney, there was Queensland in between, but it was kind of because my stepdad moved up there and we'd spend holidays with him, and then we wouldn't come back and we'd stay at school there, and then I spent a year in Sydney, a year in Queensland back, and I did that for 5-6 years on and off. But coming to Sydney, coming to Glebe, my very first day at Glebe, I remember being asked what nasho I was. I had no idea what that meant. I was like, I'm a country kid.
That was urban phrase back then.
Yeah, I was like, what's your nasho? And I was
Yeah.
like, what? I don't know what that means. And I said, what? They said, where you from? I said, oh, from Griffith. They go, no, where you from? I said, oh, I was born in Perth. They go, no, where you from?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm Aboriginal. And I remember this person, we know this person too, who asked me that. I'll share in a second. But I said, oh, I'm Aboriginal. He goes, no, you can't be. I said, what do you mean I can't be? I was kind of like, what? Like I'm been Aboriginal my whole life. My family's Aboriginal. And I think the picture that he had in his head wasn't standing in front of him.
Yeah, totally.
And that dynamic was different because growing up, especially in Griffith, I said I'm Aboriginal, and it was either, that was accepted, and then I was accepted, or I got teased about it.
Yeah.
But coming to Glebe, it was different, and it was Ralph. Very first day of school was Ralph. Yeah.
Rest in peace,
Yeah, I know, bless him. Yeah. It was kind of a funny.
Ralph will come back into our story later on.
Yeah.
When we talk about homelessness.
Yeah. And and that was my first interaction.
Yeah.
At Glebe, and so that was quite different to what I was used to, but I enjoyed it. Very diverse, different backgrounds. You look at our friend group. You've got our close friend. He's from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Strong Maori family. We grew up with Lebanese people in our community.
Yeah.
Islander boys, Asian boys, like every different
White boys, East African boys, Turkish boys, name them, that was there, yeah.
It'd be easier to name the different groups we didn't grow up with.
Yeah.
And I love that. And that was cool. For me, I did find myself getting into trouble, and I kind of, that sense of identity or belonging was like, I liked having different people of different backgrounds. That was cool.
Yeah.
But I think something that was missing for me, especially when I did move to Sydney, was who am I?
Yeah.
I know I'm Aboriginal, but what does that mean? I know I'm a Noongar person, but what does that mean? And not
Totally.
growing up with family and culture, and you probably saw this, like I started to gravitate towards certain culture, and I was like, oh, I think I like the feel and fit of this culture, so I'm going to try and navigate my way and fit into that culture.
Yeah.
Because I was, I guess, inspired by their culture and by a person I was really close with, and but really, because the reason why I did that and not really gravitate towards my own culture or Aboriginal people was because everything I saw in the media was negative.
Yeah.
Everything I had at home in uncles and aunties and all my role models, all negative.
Yeah.
For example, spent a school holidays like travelling to Goulburn jail to see my dad, during holidays. I remember going back to school. Oh, what'd you do on holidays? And the in joke within our family was, oh, we're going to see dad in his new job. And so I'd tell people, oh, we had to travel.
Overalls,
in his greens. And I did that. We did that all the time. I remember going to different jails, Goulburn, Manus, all different jails, and just dad had his new job, but really dad was in jail.
Yeah.
My stepfather locked up for probably, he's been locked up probably more than half his life. He's in his 50s now. And we spent a lot of time going to jails and visiting him, his new job. And I can laugh about it now. And I think it's probably like, I did get myself into trouble and did stupid things as a kid, but I was scared of jail because of those experiences. My dad got stabbed in jail, and it was quite a big deal. Like he almost died. In hindsight, he probably should have died, but he didn't. He survived. And other stories I heard from jail scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, totally.
And I think it's meant to. It's not a place you want to go.
So can I pick up on a part in this story where you're because we're very close, right? So I remember in our high school years, towards the end of high school, your mum made the decision to move back interstate. And funny time, right? Because you're talking about all this stuff about identity, belonging, connection. You know, you finally found this safe group of friends around you, this community, despite still, navigating all that identity stuff like you talk to. So I remember mum moving interstate, and I remember you, as the oldest of that 7, had to really step up. So I remember you suddenly were the in year 11 maybe, or year 12. And at one stage in that 3-bedroom apartment in fucking Elgar Street, you had like 7 kids.
Yeah.
And you were 17, 18. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Part
of your journey?
It was a 3-bedroom apartment in Glebe, and it was small. But growing up with 5 people in my bedroom wasn't anything I wasn't used to. Like I was used to that. I remember one time we'd have like 15, 20 people in that house. And so mum decided to move back, and it made sense because mum left where she's from. She left her family, left her home, left her friends, left her country a long time ago. And made no hard feelings towards mum whatsoever with her decision to go back home and connect. And like I get it, I understood that. So mum made that decision. She took most of the kids bar myself back, but one by one they all came back, because that might have been where we're from or where mum's from, but we grew up here in Glebe, in Sydney, and that's our home. So one by one my brothers and sisters came back, and we end up, it was a succession of tenancy back then. So the house went from mum to me.
You were 18 by then,
I was 18 by then,
just
turned 18, so I got the succession of tenancy. And my stepdad and my brothers came back into my life, or my dad and my brothers came back into my life, and they needed somewhere to stay. And I think my sister brought home some friends of her friends that needed place to stay and all that kind of stuff.
But your stepdad, like you said, had spent a lot of time in prison. You had a lot of stuff going on, so it wasn't like there was another adult there that was helping, take care of the house. I remember you very much had to step up and
he was useless.
Do a lot of that.
I don't want to say too much bad things about him, but he's not a nice person. He's someone I don't talk to. I haven't talked to him probably 12 years, 15 years. He's just not a nice person. But he moved in, and that made it really difficult. It was just an extra kid I had to look after, essentially. I remember, I'll give you a quick story. Like, he went next door, beautiful people, but they were heroin users. And the old man had a quick fix, had a shot of heroin, and I remember my sister like screaming next door, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And I went over, and he had a shot, and he was turning blue. He was on his back. He was choking. I had to turn him on his back, on his side, pull his tongue out, and he threw up everywhere. And then he sat up and was like, "What's wrong? Stop being a pussy," basically is what he said.
Yeah.
And I was like, and that was just normal. That was just another day.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I've got to. And I think at that time I was working, and I was transitioning into what do I do next? What do I do for myself? What do I do for ads? And university was that next step for me. And the reason why I was even looking at university was because of yourself, and also Daniel Denford.
Yeah,
give
it
him
was
a
one
shout
of my
out.
motivations too.
Yeah, because he grew up in very similar circumstances as us, in housing commission, was single parent, and he went to university, and I never even thought that university was possible for people like us.
Totally.
And Daniel, in my mind, was the first one to break that mold, and then it was yourself, and then I was like, well, far out, if they can do it, why not? I can do it too.
Those dumbasses can get in. Like, I'll take anyone.
No, it wasn't so much if those dumbasses can do it. It was just like if they can do it, like you're just being better. Yeah. And I think that was the beauty of our friend group. It was we challenged each other to step up and just to be the best versions of ourselves, if that be sport, because you and I are very competitive in boxing. I was never no good in basketball, but boxing, running, and then it went into education, going to university or work or job.
Totally.
And to see you boys do it, I was like, oh, I actually think I can do that. So I was navigating that as well, and looking after my dad, my 2 sisters, and my 4 brothers, and then we had people on and off coming in as well. Dad, he'd bring home all sorts of different shifty characters, and some of them they were very not nice people, and I had to be very mindful of things and whatnot. So it was a very difficult period.
Yeah, totally. And I know some of the stories, and I know we could go very deep if we wanted to about some of those times, very, very tough times. But so you started to get a bit of a perspective around education as a bit of a pathway, right, for you. But I know that it wasn't a straight trajectory in terms of going there and then life was good, much like myself, right? Like I got into uni, and then I had to defer after the first semester because I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. I was couch surfing, auntie cafes, different people around the area, whoever would take me. Reaching out for help everywhere, couldn't get any help, and I was lucky enough to get a spot in Bondi Youth Accommodation, now called Caretakers Cottage, I think it is, in Bondi Junction here in Sydney. I remember being in there, and the casework was mad. Gab, who we both had. Shout out to Gab. I know he still works in the sector. Absolute legend.
In Ashfield, I caught up with him a few years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Good lad.
Yeah, mad. But I remember being in housing there, and we were best mates, so we're out every weekend, carrying on or whatever. But I remember you were in a bad place, and I remember one particular night you went out. I can see the scar under your eye as we're talking with the light, where you got into a bit of trouble, and you ended up in hospital, maybe getting that stitched up.
Yeah,
and I think I came to see her, and I was like,
that's right.
I was like, bro, what's going on? Like, where are you staying? We need to. Maybe this mob that's helping me can help you. And I think I spoke to Gab or I spoke to someone at Bondi Youth, and I was like, look, I need to refer my friend. I was like 18, 19 too, so I'm trying to fucking help my friend. Like, because I know I've seen a lot of our people go in a bad place, and I don't want my best mate going there too, right? So however that happened, it did, right? And you got housing through Bondi Youth Accommodation.
that was a lifesaver, literally a lifesaver. I remember I was still recovering from my injuries. Yeah. And I rocked up, and the youth worker looked at me like...
Yeah. You had a shaved head too.
A shaved head, black eyes,
I
had stitches. I looked like I was just out of Fight Club. Yeah. And he was looking at me like... And I told him the story, and...
he was like, I've heard a few.
Yeah. And I just told him. I did break down, actually. I was emotional, and I was in a really dark place. I said, I actually have nowhere to live. Yeah. I kind of did have somewhere... So the house in Glebe, the succession of tenancy went from mum to me, and because I did get into university, actually I moved back. I went back to WA for a year just to connect with family and help mum out as well. So I had to give it to my sister. So it was in her name. That was not a problem. I could come and
You
go.
could have found a bed,
Yeah,
but would that have been the best place? For
No,
you?
I would have. I would have done some not nice things to some not nice people.
Yeah.
Probably my stepdad.
Yeah.
So I removed myself from that situation, and yeah, very similar to yourself, couch surfing, and stayed at Auntie Kath's and Auntie Faye's for a little bit, and yeah, it's same thing. Whoever could take me in.
Yeah.
And I remember when you were going through that situation, I just wanted to help so much, but I couldn't. I wasn't in a position to do so. And I remember we having that conversation, and you were like, "Oh, I can help by referring you on," and you did. Yeah. And I think it helped both of us like immensely. It would definitely save my life. Yeah. If I didn't have them, I don't know where I wouldn't be here. I'm very confident saying I wouldn't be where I am today.
I just remember as a kid, bro, like watching it, like. And watching what you're going through and just go, fuck, like my friend needs help, like, and then I watched, and it was, I will not say his name, but the person who you're out with now, when that night happened, he's in a bad place today, right? Yeah, so like for me, I sort of reflect on that journey, like fuck, that could be my best mate, where he is right now, you know. And at that time, being so young, it's crazy to reflect about it. But I remember driving to your house at Elgar Street and going up there and speaking to you. And you were like fucking, you know, shaved head, stitches, like a bit scattered, still recovering from the weekend. But but even then, right, it was a journey. And like, I think we talk about like policy in the housing space. And that's where I see like the complexity of it, right? Is like, it's one thing to have social housing or housing opportunities for homeless young people or whoever. I think a really important part for us was actually to get out of the chaos a little bit, like as in like not being directly inside it all day every day. So like when we went, like, you know, we're from Glebe, Bondi Junction, it's like a 10-minute drive, right? So it's not far away from our community in terms of our social connections, but it was just that far enough removed that old mate was going to come knock on our door or people couldn't find us just to
that's exactly right,
do nothing, you know, like.
And it's a very good point you make. It was far enough away to
you went to
escape the crap. Yeah. Kensington,
mad little, it was like a brand new unit.
I thought I won the lotto. Yeah. Like the place was unreal. Like I grew up in housing commission. Then here I was in a 1-bedroom little apartment, which was brand new. Yeah. And had an oven, washing machine, shower, had my own room. Because my bedroom was a lounge room my whole life, pretty much. Like I did have a bedroom to myself when I was maybe 7 or 8. Yeah. But the bedroom was the lounge room was my bedroom.
And how powerful is that for a young person that's trying to get out of this cycle of the only world they've ever seen is fucking chaos. Yeah. And you know, all that sort of stuff to then see this whole other safe world that they could see themselves within, you know.
Honestly, didn't think it was possible, eh? Yeah. I remember my first couple of nights in the house, I was like, just had to, before I threw a massive house party, invited everybody over, but I just had to pinch myself and go, this is unreal. And and I enjoyed, I had fun. I really did. I had fun. I think at that time though, I had fun, but was within my means and reason. I didn't go over the top, I don't think. Well, it was the youth workers didn't kick me out. I remember when we lived together, we had one situation where they were close to kicking us out. Might touch on that a little bit later, but all that was just from having a big party and not cleaning up, and we missing an appointment, and youth workers come knocking on our door, and our house wasn't in great shape. But once we woke up and we cleaned up, and it was all good. Totally. And I think that's part of growing up and being an adult.
Yeah, I want to touch on that, right? Because so me and you found ourselves in this homeless youth accommodation service, not living together. We both had our own semi-independent properties. I was in Bondi Junction, you were in Kensington. But then
good times.
But then we got housing in Redfern.
Oh wow, yeah.
And
this forgot about that.
This is where our friend Ralph comes back, but also where we talk about policy and services like this for our people, where sometimes people that are recovering or dealing with complex trauma can be triggered and set up to fail. I think that was a perfect example. So for anyone listening, me and Adam will put into stereotypical public housing unit in Redfern, Moorhead Street. Absolute chaos. it was everything that we'd experienced in Glebe times fucking 10.
Yeah, 100%. I'm laughing because it's
Getting raided, like
so funny.
neighbours
Man.
getting raided
Yeah.
weekly.
Remember that poxy payphone down the bottom?
Yeah.
You had every Tom, Dick and Harry on that payphone at all hours of night.
Totally. And a quick story for this, you know, I think I talk about it in the blog when when my caseworker brought me there. He goes, "I've got to tell you, Sam, I'd feel dishonest moving you in here and not telling you that the two guys that were in here before you, one of them murdered the other one." And I was like, "Oh, fuck."
But didn't you ask the question about why is the carpet different in one of the bedrooms than the rest of the house? And that was the response you got.
No, I said, I go, "Oh," he said that, and then I said, "Oh, well, that probably explains why there's only one room with new carpet."
Yeah.
But it was the biggest room, so I was like, do I take the murder room, which is bigger, or do I take the one that doesn't need to get smoked, but it's smaller, you know?
I'm laughing not because it's funny, but that was just a coping mechanism.
True.
It's true, yeah.
But crazy times. Couldn't write it, you know, a lot
No,
of it.
you couldn't.
Couldn't write of it. And Ralph, our mate Ralph, bless him, and you know, he's passed away. He's no longer with us, but he amazing young Filipino lad from high school, got really caught up in the Asian gangs when we were in high school.
Yeah, man, he was
really down that route.
So talented in terms of athletic ability, man. I mean, basketball, man. He could jump so high. Like, he was just unreal. I remember when I first met him, he was solid. I was like, I want to be like him.
Totally.
I was a skinny little black fella.
Totally.
I wanted to be as ripped as him.
Totally.
Yeah.
The first time I pulled up at Moorhead Street, I jumped out of my car. And you know the feeling when you know you're going to get jumped? You just feel it, right?
Yeah.
No one said anything to you yet, but you know something's going down here.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, all right. Something's going down here.
I remember that.
And then I see this big, overweight, bulky guy with a beanie on, Filipino lad, shuffle across the street and go, "Hey!" to these guys. And then the guys just like, shit themselves and walked away. And I was like, who the fuck is this? I was like, it's Ralph. And anyway, but he was really unwell, right? He had really bad diagnosed mental health
of issues,
mental health stuff going on.
But that didn't really bother us, because he come up and he hung out with us.
He spent a lot of time with us then, back
it. It was
in
just
those
like
days.
Yeah.
But it's funny how he's come into our story, Talk about identity and then saving myself from getting schooled on the streets again. But they were crazy times. But I think what I highlight about that, right, is like I feel like there's so much that can be learnt from our journey in terms of what worked well, and then areas for improvement, right?
Yeah.
Like I would never put a kid I was working with in one of those houses I was living in, Moorhead Street.
No way.
And I've said that to the caseworkers, and they know. Like Gab knows, he's great, he's an amazing caseworker. Yeah. But the reality is that they don't have a lot of resources, right? And the need is massive. Yeah. So like, well, do we keep this kid on the street or do we give him Moorhead Street? Yeah. Probably safer on the street. Yeah. Sometimes, but you know, so like the actual need for housing stock, you know, in safe places and not just safe places, but like inspiring like places that are different to what we've been brought up within too. You know, exposing us to different perspectives and opportunities and ways of seeing the world. It's been crazy.
Well, that was interesting that time of our lives because because we're both strong Aboriginal people. They thought, house in Redfern, we'll put the Aboriginal boys in this place. But like really, we it wasn't. I think what I'm trying to say is that if you're sometimes if you identify as an Aboriginal person or Torres Strait Islander person, it just puts you in with people that got mental health issues or with people with disabilities. No disrespect to people with those ailments. Yeah. But sometimes I feel as us blackfellas get lumped in, and our needs and what we need to overcome our challenges are completely different. Yeah. But we kind of all got lumped into the same paint with the same brush and just all lumped into the same area. Totally. And kind of for me, and then growing up and having those experiences, and then working in juvenile justice space and working in the housing space and the different spaces I've worked in, kind of just what you said. I would never ever, if I could help it, put a young person in where we grew up. Yeah, no way. It's not going to get better. Totally. It's really really rare that people do, especially like with juvenile justice. Young people get locked up, get in trouble, they usually come out worse
Yeah.
or know how to do more.
Yeah. So look, I think they're just we could talk underwater about some of the challenges that we've had to go through, and I think we've got some really good stories to share as well. And I'd love to spend some more time doing a deep dive into some of that stuff, because I think that there's plenty of opportunities for learning, not just for other young people to inspire them or motivate them, much like we were when we saw other people that could do that.
Yeah.
But for people in decision-making positions when they're making policy,
100%, couldn't agree more.
How often are there opportunities to centre the voices of people like us that have a lived experience, but also a professional experience as well? So I want to move into talking about some of that sort of stuff, because aside from all the stuff that you've been able to achieve personally, the cycles you've managed to break, all that sort of stuff, you've also gone on to do some amazing stuff professionally too.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to us, give us a little bit of a history of that? I know you've done a lot of stuff in the youth mentoring space, training space.
Yeah, so it's, again, got to pinch myself. I just didn't ever think I'd be able to achieve half the stuff that I have, and I'm really, really proud of that. And it's kind of weird. I guess we're both at that age now where we've done a lot of things, and you probably talk about it a lot when you're in your mid to late 20s and maybe 30s, but we're in our mid to late 30s now, and and you kind of like, we've both got families, and it's really nice to reflect and have a talk, have a yarn like this, and reflect on those stories. There's some of the things we've talked about already, I've like not forgotten about, but haven't really thought about before, and it's really nice. But yeah, like finishing school, and you and I have similar stories. Like I finished school at 20, simply because I didn't enjoy school, dropped out a few times. I was lazy as well. But I made
You also got caught up in coming from WA, right? Like
from Queensland to Queensland and New South Wales, actually from WA to New South Wales kept me back a year when I was in kindy. Yeah. And then going from New South Wales to Queensland, I was in different years. So I got caught up in that. That didn't help. But end of the day, it was me being lazy and not enjoying school, and around 17, 18, got myself into trouble and found myself sleeping in couches and I'm sure what you call it, homeless or semi-homeless or couch surfing, but I was in that predicament as 17, and I just made a decision to education was was my way out. I didn't know what that looked like at the time, but I knew that finishing school was a good thing. So I failed year 11, went out and worked, failed that, got arrested, almost got thrown into jail. Was really lucky that I got a second chance, or a 10th chance really, and I decided there and then to make the most of it, and so I went back to school. I was very lucky that our principal at the time, shout out to Miss Collier, she allowed me to go back into school at the age of, back to do my HSC in year 11 at the age of 18, knowing that I'd be 20 finishing school. So I finished school at 20 and kind of was like, what to do next? And I took a year off and went back home to Bunbury and connect with my Noongar culture and meet family, and that was really powerful. I met my biological grandfather for the first time, who I'm pretty close to now.
Uncle Sid Jackson.
Yeah. So Pop Sid Jackson, who's a well-known person in the AFL circles. Played for Carlton, famous number 5 in Carlton back in the 60s and 70s, and normally when I just say who my pop is, like, gets me a lot of cred. And I'm very, very lucky. It's made identifying as an Aboriginal person quite easy, because I say my pop Sid Jackson. Placed me straight away. But I've got, he's just one of many family members that I have. But I am lucky, and I've used that to my advantage.
That was a big part of when we lived together. I remember you having the printed out photos, like old school, like you printed them off at office where, or someone's printer. Someone's printer. They were like A4, colour pictures of you, Pop, your dad. Yeah,
I'm so proud of that. First time ever that my dad, my biological father, and my Pop had been in the same place together. First and last time. Yeah, that was back in 2007. 6 or 7. So that's a long time ago. I was so proud of that. Like that's my bloodline. That's who I look like. That's who I am, and that's. I was so proud. I had heaps of photos of mum, brothers and sisters, and I was proud of all of them, because that's who I am. Totally. And going back home for that year was what I needed to do. And I remember coming back and starting uni, and that's when we moved into Redfern together. And finishing uni was a struggle, not gonna lie. It was tough, but I finished. Like most things, I took my time, but I got there. And when actually my last year of uni or second last year of uni, I just fell into this awesome mentoring program, mentoring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students just in the local area.
Yeah.
It's quite a small mentoring program at that time. So I went to university I wanted to be a PE teacher.
Yeah.
So I went to UTS. I did a Bachelor of Sports Science, and then I had the option of doing my Diploma of Education, it was called back then, or now I think it's a Masters of Education, just to give you that teaching degree to go on and teach, and that's what I wanted to do. I was the eldest in my family, and I always was the babysitter and looked after. I was really good with kids and young people, and I love sport, so I thought put the two together.
Yeah.
It's a PE teacher, so I wanted to be a PE teacher. Didn't quite know what I was in for in terms of going to university. Experienced racism there again from students and from lecturers and teachers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like in your face racism. It was kind of like subtle digs at you kind of thing. And any time anyone mentioned the word Aboriginal, I dead set the whole class would turn around and look at me to wait for my reaction. And that was confronting, but I think I was starting to get the skills to know how to navigate that, but still the old fist came out a couple of times because that was my main way of dealing with in your face racism. Yeah. And so I was still at uni, and I fell into a cadetship with this mentoring program. I loved it. It was awesome. I ended up working there for 10 years. I learned a lot.
10 years you were there?
Yeah, 10 years I was there. Yeah. I 8 years as a full-time and 2 years as a cadet, so 10 years altogether.
When you saw that experience, because 10 years, I know that you worked across a range of different roles, different experiences, locally, at a national level, and things like that. What was you, being a black fella from community, knowing what kids, coming from the struggle, and then working for a program where you mentor and maybe similar kids from similar circumstances, what's the key ingredients for you that makes it work?
Oh, that's a really tough question to answer, and I'll preface this by saying I'm definitely not an expert in anything. I like to think that I know a lot about a lot of different things. Definitely not an expert, but I just think being real and being honest, like as simple as that is, but telling your story. So I remember when if I had a new group of students come through, kids come through, young people, I'd sit down and like share my story, and then I'd allow them time to share their story if they wanted to. Most of the time, kids are a bit shy and a bit shame, but it did have a fair few kids stand up because I shared my story, and I had many young people come up to me and say, "Oh, story was inspirational," or "I want to finish school now." I had so many kids. Like it's really just humbling to think about it. But I had many young people come up to me and say, "I finished school because of your story," and I was like, "Oh wow, like that's powerful." And I think the main ingredient for me was just being myself and sharing. I'm an oversharer, so sometimes like these kids come in and I'm sitting there sharing my story, and I can see teachers and principals in the room, and they're just like, "What the hell is he telling these kids?" Because I'm telling them how I got arrested and doing this and blah blah blah, and but it wasn't in a bragging way. It was just in a way that I was silly and made mistakes. And my big mantra from the back of that was, like, you've heard the saying, everyone's heard the saying, learn from your mistakes. Yeah, of course. If you make a mistake, learn from it. I started to figure out from that experience is learn from other people's mistakes. Like, I made all these mistakes. These young people don't need to make those mistakes. Totally. Learn from my stuff ups. Like, if you want to do it, this is the outcome, because I've done it. Yeah. And so I had a lot of young people, especially young men, come up to me and say, "Oh, I was going to go down that path, but listening to you and your story, I don't want to go down that path." Totally. But some still did, and that's their journey and their story.
We know it's complex, right? Even just our own reflections around deciding to go down that education route. A big motivation for us was, we talked about Daniel Denford, right? So I'm sure that wasn't the only reason we were able to do that, but it was a big part of inspiring us, right? Yeah. So I'm sure it's the same sort of thing. Like, I'm sure you've been a big piece in a lot of young people's journey to decide where they've gone. Yeah, and it's actually it's an honour and privilege to be able to be in that position to do that. And this mentoring program allowed me to do that, and I loved that experience. It was awesome. It was, as I said, I worked there for a very long time, and I absolutely loved it, and it was very community focused early on. Things shifted later on, and hence why I left and whatnot. But I won't go into that too deep. But
was just very community orientated. The first few years that I worked at this mentoring program, and I loved it. Then it went from local community to further in the state, and then went from state to interstate. And then when it started to go overseas, that's when I kind of lost a little bit of connection. But I had a role where I would travel around to all different parts of Australia, and talk to young people, all different. The job took me to Perth, took me to Darwin, took me to Mackay, Rockhampton. I was in 1 week. I'd be in Melbourne, and then I'd be in Adelaide, and then I'd be back home in Sydney for a week, and then I'd be back over in Perth, and then I'd be up to Darwin, then I'd cross to Brisbane, and then Sunny Coast, and then I'd be in the middle of the desert and middle of nowhere. Yeah. All these different places. So I absolutely love that, and
I think you've travelled more than anyone I know.
Yeah,
and like whether it's through work or whether it's through the national sporting stuff you've done.
Yeah.
But I even know you went to South Africa with Jeff McMullen.
Yeah, actually, that's
as part of that. That
was awesome.
And you sat down. You went to Nelson Mandela's house.
Yeah.
And sat down with his daughter. Swazi. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
And had a yarn about all things sort of mentoring and that, right?
Just give me goosebumps.
Share some of that. I'd love to hear that yarn.
Yeah. Well, where do I start? So I was lucky enough to go to South Africa through work. Yeah. It was a funny story how that come about, and I'll share that in a second. But it was the second
diarrhea on the plane or something.
Yeah. So it was the second time I've been to South Africa. I actually went back in 2009 as part of the Australian University Rugby League team. Yeah. And that was my first time overseas. South Africa, love it. You can see disparity between rich and poor, and it's quite in your face. So the struggle that I went through and we went through, it's times a million there. You see it straight away. As soon as you get off the plane, you see it straight away. In Australia, it's a bit more hidden. Yeah. It's still there, obviously, and you can walk in pockets of Sydney and still see it. But in South Africa, it's right there as soon as you get off the plane. So through work, it was the second time I went to South Africa. And it was awesome. I got to go with Jeff McMullen, who's just an absolute phenomenal human being. Like, he's unreal. Like, I love Jeff. So much time and respect for Jeff. And actually, I was in Bali the week.
We'll have to get him on the podcast,
mate. Yeah, he'd be.
Shout out to Jeff.
His stories are, mate. You think we got stories? His stories are just amazing.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I was very privileged to listen to his journey. It's just absolutely unreal. I wasn't meant to go to that South Africa trip for work. It was someone else was meant to go. He ended up misplaced his passport. Couldn't find his passport. And so I got the call up, but I had just come back from Bali for a friend's wedding. For his 3 times we've mentioned him, Daniel Denford's wedding. Far out, Danny's getting a lot of shout outs. He's going to love this.
Royalties off this or something.
Yeah. So I was actually Danny and Josie's wedding, and I come back and as most Australians do, when you come back from Bali, you get the old Bali belly. I think I drank some dodgy water or ice cubes in the drink, or maybe I did eat at some food stalls, and then the week when we got home, they said there was some dodgy stuff being sold at those certain stalls. I won't mention it, but I wasn't feeling
you're
good.
In a bad way.
I was in a massive Bali belly. It was really bad.
So how was it when you got to South Africa?
I got the phone call to say I got back from Bali on the Monday, the Queen's public holiday. I got back on the Monday night. Got the call Tuesday lunchtime to say, can you go to South Africa? I went. It was an amazing experience. So I got to go to Soweto, which is what they call it, a township over there. It's really, very just shanty town, what they call them. And I was actually over there during a memorial. I think it was in June. It was when two young boys got. I should know this more than I do, but 2 young boys got chased down by police and died. Yeah. And so we were lucky enough to be in Soweto during that memorial, and it was just such an amazing. It was sad, super sad, but it was an honour and privilege to be there during that time. Yeah. Got to go to where Nelson Mandela and his wife and kids lived, and the house was tiny. Yeah. And they lived there with a whole bunch of kids, and they then got to meet one of their daughters. It was just sitting in her house.
Yeah,
kicking back. I was drinking her coffee and her soda water and whatnot, and I was interviewing her along with Jeff McMullen. It was again, that was another pinch me moment. I just was like, what?
Yeah,
It
totally.
was, and listening to her story and listening to her share stories about her father and mother, just
Yeah.
absolutely, just amazing. And for me, one of Mandela's quotes has been my mantra. The key to unlocking your potential is education.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remember having that up in my room on the fridge when we lived in Stanmore
Yeah.
at a period of time. The key to unlocking your future is education.
Mm.
And I remember hearing that maybe 16, 17 and that's what started making me think maybe school is a good thing. Just finish school and see what happens. And from finishing school, able to go to university, finish university, able to go into a job where I absolutely loved. And then that allowed me the platform to go into other areas that I just didn't think that I would ever work in. Like I worked in community housing for a little bit, for about 2 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Full
Hard.
Full circle in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think that was
Made it
probably
harder.
the reason why it drew me to that position.
Yeah.
It was good. I was able to be part of the decision making process and give my 2 cents worth to what I think should happen and shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
If that was listened to or whatnot or implemented, majority of the time no, because of different reasons or whatnot. But at least I put myself in the frame to even be there, and I'm very proud of that.
People conscious, did they know that you had an experience as a user, as a service user?
I think my employment, my managers and whatnot at the time probably didn't, but working with community and working with mob, they definitely did. Yeah. Because they'd ask around about. Well, one of them I knew like very well from just around the traps growing up in Glebe and Redfern. They knew me and they knew my story to an extent, and then just sitting down with them privately and having conversations. And so I was always brought in on the conversations through that person. That person held a pretty high position, and I really respect her. She's an amazing woman. She's awesome.
So you've gone from the struggle in Glebe to touring around the country internationally, playing sport, to sitting in Nelson Mandela's house with his daughter, to navigating youth homelessness, to then working for a countrywide mentoring organisation where you're impacting hundreds, if not thousands, of young people by sharing your story.
Yeah.
And then you've gone sort of back into the housing sort of space to try and add your perspective into there. Where are you now?
Yeah, when you put it like that, it's, I just, again, like, wow, did I do all that stuff? That's unreal. That's cool. And it's just making me reflect and just be really grateful that I've been able to achieve those things. And obviously there's a lot of hard work and people to help you along the way. Like you definitely can't do anything by yourself. You need help, and I'm very thankful for everyone who has helped me. And I guess going into that housing, into the community housing sector, has led me into where I am now. So I was a chance meeting with a Wiradjuri woman by the name of Charlene McKenzie, who's my manager. She's amazing woman. She's helped me out a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. She's unreal. She's brilliant. She's kind of I'd already pretty much unlocked my potential, but I think she's been able to tap into what's next for me.
Yeah,
And she's been able to do that in a way that fits me and suits me, and she understands what makes me tick, which I think is really important. And she's done that because she's been able to sit down and take the time to listen to my story. And so I moved on from the community housing experience, community housing sector, into working for a community organisation called Three Bridges Community, which Three Bridges is awesome. So it services the St. George and Shire areas. Yeah. And they do anything from aged care, NDIS care, after school care, kind of like a one shop kind of thing, and really services the community really well in a variety of different things. So they had an Aboriginal arm there, so I jumped in and worked there for a little bit with my manager Charlene, and that was cool. I got to work in the NDIS space, and I got to work with clients who were incarcerated. So I had never gone into jails and worked with people before, and I love that. It was taxing. It was really taxing.
It's hard work, eh?
It's extremely hard work, but I loved it. But there's a time frame on that, because it's really, like, I was working with some sometimes not nice people, like working with sex offenders, and I was working with a young person who was probably voted Australia's #1 young person, and was very well known within different organisations and whatnot. I love working with him. Like it was a challenge, but I loved it. And I think when I was working with him, we made some real progress. And then, as most good things do, funding gets cut or something happens or change of government, and I didn't get to work with that young person as much as I wanted to. And it not just me, but other people were having some really good impact. He got out of jail and working, and there was consistency and routine in his life. He never had that before. And if you listen to his story, so sad. Like, for him to even be alive is just amazing. And then people would probably read his rap sheet and just go, oh, what a dirtbag, or just judge him from that. But if you actually take the time to sit down with somebody and learn their story, like his story will have anybody in tears. If his story doesn't have you in tears, then you're not human. It's such a sad story, and no excuse for the things he's done, but there's a reason why he's done those things.
Totally. And that's one of the fundamental policy gaps, right, in terms of thinking about prisons and the criminal justice system, is they're not, we're getting a lot of our mob and the broader community that are dealing with complex trauma, addiction, mental health stuff going on, cognitive disability, all this stuff's happening, and then
FASD was massive. It's massive in our community. So fetal alcohol syndrome, and then the drug version of that as well. And I've seen that a lot, especially with the lads that I was working with who were incarcerated. It's really sad. Yeah,
massively. What do you think are some of the most important things that our people need when we're coming out of prison?
Oh man,
we know there's some big gaps.
Oh, there's massive gaps. Like, I had lads who would get out, and they say they're getting out at 9:30, and then they wouldn't get out until 5:30 that day. Just simple things of someone coming to pick them up. When you get out, the boys are told, the people that I was working with were told, when you get out, you've got to go to Centrelink, you've got to do this, you've got to go see your parole officer, you've got to do this, this and this. No one shows them how to do that, or even picks them up and takes them to these different appointments. They're expected to do that on their own, and that's like, they've just some of one particular person, I obviously won't mention names, but worked with him. He was incarcerated for 10 years. How is he gonna? He doesn't know what bus to jump on or train to jump on. Totally. First thing he did was he went and saw his his partner or ex-partner and visited his kids, and he had a good time, had a big night, and he missed his parole appointment. And he was back in jail.
See you later.
Breached straight away.
Totally.
And I just think that is so. Okay, yeah, maybe he should have went to his parole appointment. But come on, have some leeway. Like, it's so silly.
Bro, when I was working at Red Cross and I was doing the mentoring at Park Lee in the prison, this lad was getting out, and he's getting out on Christmas Day. He said, "Can you come pick us up?" I said, "Yeah, bro, I'll come pick you up." And he's like, and I got there at 6 a.m. thinking surely that's early enough because I knew I heard the stories, right, that they let you out at, whatever time just to stitch you up. And I thought I'll get out there at 6. Surely, Christmas morning, 6 a.m. I'm out there. It's gone. They let him out at I don't know, 3 a.m.
That happened
whatever
to me.
it is, it's crazy.
Your story on Christmas Day, mine was similar with, I think it was Anzac, on a public holiday on Anzac Day, and it's just, like, why do that? I think they do it just to be arseholes, to be honest.
Well, whatever the reason is behind why they do it, it just sets people up to fail coming out of prison, right? If you've got lack of support in whatever capacity, how's that for a fresh start? And getting sent out, not knowing now how to navigate any of that.
Well, you look at some of the, if we're talking about young people incarcerated with our juvenile justice system, look at the models that they use in New Zealand and Canada. There is no juvenile justice systems. If a young person gets in trouble, they go back to connect with culture, identity, and then they're made to do different things, if it be work or community service or whatever the case may be. If they are that bad, let's put it out there. There are some people who just can't function and probably don't belong in society. But you deal with those people. That's fine. But to lock up, say, a 12-year-old, all the stories we've heard in Darwin, in Northern Territory at the moment, even in WA, I've had a cousin, a family member who got run over and killed because he did the wrong thing, stole a motorbike, but the owner of the motorbike thought it was in his power to jump in his four-wheel drive and run my little cousin over and kill him.
Yeah, totally.
He was 14. It was
Totally.
just absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
And nothing much happened to that person. Makes you wild.
Remember. Yeah, massively. I think the juvenile justice system, the biggest policy problem we see when we look at stuff like New Zealand, youth justice conferences they have. That was born out of like a Maori model, like of community having ownership over that space. Like it would be run by like elders and mob, and it would be about bringing the victim and the offender together. Community sort of owned it. They'd talk about how this happened, and the community would determine what the they call it an outcome plan here in Australia, but what the solution was and the recourse was, and it was based on a whole thing about like that from a cultural perspective. They called it reintegrative shaming. Shaming was important, but it was more important to have that young person not ostracized from the community. Like they still needed to be a part of the community. So how could they do this? But then when they brought it to Australia, so all this great research coming out, it's so good, we've got to take it to Australia. And then how do they pilot here? They give the control of it to the police. So the police
and the courts.
The police and the courts, right? So then the system is controlling this diversion pathway. So it loses the whole integrity and center of why it was successful. There's some of the complex barriers we see in a policy perspective here.
It's still 2022, and in Northern Territory, it's 100% of the juvenile justice centres in NT. 100% is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. 100%. Like, think about that for a second. 100%. We're overrepresented in all states and territories, but 100%, like, that's just ridiculous. Like, it's not good enough. I think it's high 80% in back home in WA. I think it's 75% in 85% in parts of Queensland, and those numbers are consistent across the board. It's not good enough.
Our girls and our women are the fastest growing prison population per capita in the world. I remember hearing. It's
scary.
We're in a massive but we know that we have, the evidence is there, right? We know what sort of works for our communities.
I agree with that.
There's some exciting stuff sort of happening, like the Wallama list got launched, Tila Reid, Daniel Daylight, all that, some really staunch people in that space being a part of that.
I've known Danny for a long time, and he's doing some really good work.
So I don't know, man. But the more we keep talking about this and exploring the solutions, all the ways forward, the more we can start to make some progress.
I think we've already mentioned it earlier. It's the decision makers sit at the top level. They need to come to the party, because we know what works. We've already mentioned awesome people, awesome systems. We know what works. It's just the funding doesn't get where it needs to be, or the wrong people are in charge, and it all breaks down. And then governments will come back and say, "So we supported you. It didn't work. Let's do it our way." Totally. Well, no, you didn't really support us, because we didn't get the resources that we needed. It's really frustrating.
100%.
But it is changing slowly. But we're in a lot better space today than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So you do have to look at the positives as well.
Definitely. Hey, look, I want to get you back on again to talk specifically next time about some of the really great work that you're doing in the cultural capability, cultural awareness and training space. Me and you got the opportunity to work together in Bowraville when I was working on the Bowraville case, and you came out and I got to see firsthand the skill that you have as a facilitator and a presenter. It's quite, don't want to like G up and big head that, but you got some, you have a real clear gift for communication in that sort of space, and so I'd love to talk to some of that sort of stuff next time we come together, because I think that's a whole podcast in itself. We've yarned about that stuff before, but I just want to sort of wrap up a bit and just for anyone watching, I hope that you take so much away from your story in terms of the inspiration around the journey. And we've only just scraped the surface. Me and you know that we've only just scraped the surface. But not just the inspiration around the journey, but the reflections around the complexity of some of those social policy experiences that we've had as young people and consumers in that sort of space. So, some of the stuff that we talk to around housing and youth homelessness, I think is really valuable for people to hear. And I just really want to thank you for being so vulnerable and open and just being with us here to talk to it.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it.
And it's been a privilege to reflect on how far we've come, as kids, to be able to sit in a position where hopefully some of the stuff we're doing is going to add value for our communities and where we've come from,
Yeah.
So,
No, thanks, bro. It's
Thank
awesome. I think that reflection piece is massive, and just being on here today, having that time to reflect and just remember certain things that, not that I forgot, but just, oh, wow, yeah, I remember him, or remember doing that, or, oh, that's cool.
yeah.
So it's just really nice.
Yeah, totally. If people want to know more about yourself, what you're doing and all that sort of thing, where can they come to find out some more information?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. Just look up Adam Hansen. That's Hansen, not
Yeah.
On.
Yeah.
Always get confused, On. But yeah, just LinkedIn. I'm on there. Three Bridges Community. If you jump on our webpage, you'll see the Registered Training Organisation page, the RTO page, and that's where I am at the moment as a trainer and assessor.
Yep.
I think the official title is Aboriginal Coordinator of Training, Education and Mentoring.
Yeah, okay, great.
It's a long-winded title, but basically trainer and assessor with RTO, which I absolutely love, and talking about the cultural capabilities space and cultural awareness, competency, and something that I love to do. And it surprises me of how many Australians still don't know too much about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and what our people have gone through. So it's something that I really enjoy. It can be challenging sometimes, but I think power of education is key, and it's something that I enjoy doing. I guess I've always been educator. So yeah, be in that training space. I love it.
Fantastic. So if we've got anyone that's watching along today that's working in the HR space, they're working in capability and development, cultural awareness, please take some time to follow Adam, reach out to him, reach out to Three Bridges. RTO space is delivering a whole range of different stuff in the cultural awareness and capability area. You've heard from this yarn today that is, comes with a wealth of experience and background to how he can add value and how where he's working for can add value as well. So thanks so much, my brother, and we can't wait to get you back on and do a bit more of a deep dive into some of that cultural capability stuff.
I can't wait to get back on, brother, and thank you.
All right, bro. Well, thank you. We'll see you again soon.
I'll come back on. Do another 4.